Good afternoon and thanks for joining today's webinar, The Leadership Principle in Action, Women in Leadership. My name is Isa Hackick. I am an employee of Redback Conferencing and your facilitator for today's session. Today's webinar is presented by Denise Archie, founder of Coaching College, a multiple award-winning company. Denise is also a facilitator that specialises in leadership, change management, business coaching and presentation skills. So without further ado, I would now like to pass it on to her. How are you today, Denise?
Terrific, thank you. It's been an interesting morning actually, because I was talking to someone on the plane today and around women in leadership in their country, and was quite interesting to hear that this young girl who'd just gone to an interview 2 years ago, who's now 31, she had to convince them that she wasn't going to get married tomorrow, that she wasn't going to go off and have children so that she could have a sales representative position. So I smiled to myself thinking that has much changed over the last few years in terms of women and women's participation in business. So then I got to sort of thinking about some of the funny things or the interesting things that's happened when you are a leader. And last century, in 1995, we were leaders in the IT world, and there were two of us in our 40s, and we were invited to come to the Venture Capitalist down in Melbourne, and I remember being asked, who is the person behind you? And I physically turned around to see who they were talking about. And it was, in reference to men being supportive of what we were doing, leading the field in IT. So it becomes really interesting to start to think about what is our role as women in leadership, and what is it that we need to do as a collective, and for males as well, to actually look at some of the ways in which work can be arranged or business and values then can be aligned. So it's been quite an interesting journey, and this young lady is actually now studying a PhD in biomedical engineering. So we were talking about someone that could, offer a whole range of skills. So one of the things that I guess is that we want to understand today is, what does it mean to be a leader, and particularly, for women in a leadership role. And then we started to look at some of the facts and some of the information, and I was going to kindly move to the next slide, where we're looking at some of those, some of the women that participate in the Australian workforce, and we start to have a look at some of those facts. And the question that we want to ask is, why is it still sort of this challenge for women to be in a leadership role? And what are some of the things that we can do personally and professionally that would assist us in our move forward? So I guess I know that people, can type in questions, and welcome to do that as we go through this next hour. And we'll look at sort of our 5 keys that we use to help understand what we can do and what our role can be as women in leadership roles in business or emerging leaders. So if we can take a little bit of a poll, could we see, how many are in sort of new leadership roles, and maybe how many are been in leadership roles for a little while, and how many are aspiring to be in a leadership role? So we could put those questions, and people have a moment to answer those. Okay, do we have the results there?
People are typing at the moment, so...
Oh, thank you.
Yep. All right, so Kate says, I'm aspiring to be in a leadership role.
Terrific.
Yeah, so a few of them are. So Melinda is also in a leadership role. Sally is currently a sole trader. So Anara was in a leadership role previously with a smaller organisation, and now she's in a larger organisation aspiring to be a leadership role again. Carolyn is also aspiring to be in a leadership role, so a few of them there.
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much. And I guess the thing that that is really important in all of this is how do you sort of start to build your brand? You know, what is it about yourself and what is it that is important for you in a leader? Isa, I'm just logging in now to that site so that we can do a switch. So
fantastic.
So it's just not letting me come in here. That's the only thing. It says that it's closed.
Oh, really?
Okay, that's okay. We've got. If you just let me know, the next one there is around the facts on the PowerPoint.
Yep. We've got the facts up at the moment.
Right. So if we look at some of these facts, and this was a quote from Sheryl Sandberg, who was speaking on a TED talk, and I've given a link there that people would be interested to see. And she said that of the 190 heads of states around the world, only 9 are women. Of all women in parliament across the world, across the globe, 13% are women. And in the corporate sector, women at the top in C-level jobs and board seats, they top out about 15 or 16%. And the numbers really haven't moved except down since 2002. And you'd think in the not-for-profit world that where, you know, it's very much a women involvement, high level of women involvement, yet women at the top only rank about 20%. So we start to sort of think about why is that? Why is it that women aren't, you know, sort of stepping up more to that leadership role? And if we look at some of the participation in the Australian workforce, comprises 45% of all employees. We were very active in the role of teacher aides, and we actually, and up until the end of the 90s, teacher aides were only ever considered to be on casual terms, and we actually lobbied the government to get it changed to part-time, so they would be eligible for being part of the traineeship award. So it's been quite interesting to see the changes and the way that things have needed to progress and for people to really, you know, speak up about things. I'd be interested to know from the listeners what type of opportunities have been open to them where other women perhaps have mentored them in their role in business. Have they had women who have been mentors to them, and have they self-selected, or have they been allocated a mentor? So what's been the role of a women mentor to them in their workplace since they began work? If you could, they could answer those questions. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So quite a few people are typing at the moment, so we'll just wait for for them to write. So Melinda says she was mentored by a previous GM in a role. Sally says she's never had a female mentor. Melanie says she's had little opportunity to find a mentor, even though she would love to. Kate has said she's only had male mentors. And Anita said she's not formally mentored, however, women have sponsored her in progressing, which in some ways has been of greater value.
Oh, okay, that's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for the response there. So if we look at the next slide, around the participation rate of 2012 from the Australian census, we can see that women held 3% of chair positions from the ASIC top 200 and 2.6% of the ASIC 500. So it's quite interesting to see the statistics, and the reason we look at statistics, of course, is to give us a starting point. Because as leaders, as managers, unless we measure, then we can't really manage. So we need to know what our starting point is, and it's been interesting to look that the 7 women have joined appointed ASIC 200 companies on boards during the month of January, and yet the previous year in 2013 there was 2 appointments. So we certainly see that there's been a much more active increase. There's a lady who runs Women on Boards. If any of you are interested in perhaps, you know, getting ready to be board or be part of a board, and there's a great group of women who are doing that you may want to make a note, for your future development. That may be something that you may be interested in being a part of. So be looking at women in leadership and CEOs. There's a couple of graphs there. The first one is about board directors, and that showed, the visual representation of that, and also the international comparison of between women overseas who are on boards and those in Australia. So we do have a bit of a way in terms of some of the catching up, but we're travelling. We're travelling, at least progressing, which is really good. So the next slide that we come to is a video clip, and how leaders vision. And some of you may have seen this or heard this, and I find this really fantastic in that there was a gentleman who decided that he wanted to do one thing, and it was called the Dancing Man. And so what he did was, I'll show you as it starts. So he had this one idea, and it shows from one idea what can happen. So this is a 3-minute clip here. So Isa, if you're able to play that, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, just a second. Just have a look here.
Is it coming up there?
No. Bear with me for a moment. I just need to find it.
It's on that
You know what
slide.
it's called?
Yeah, it's got how a leader's vision can impact. Oh, where is Matt?
Where is Matt? Yep, okay.
Mm-hmm.
One moment. I'll just switch to our video player, and I've got it here, so
Thank
we
you.
can start it now.
Thank you.
That way, okay?
So as you're watching that, see, he had this idea about dancing, and this was his first go at doing this around the world. So he went to different places, and he did his dance. He had this one idea, and off he went. That as he's progressing, yeah. So what happened was, he had this one idea and off he went. And then he actually, the next time to get people doing that, he actually sent an email through Facebook, and then he went again and got more and more people. And the idea of being a leader is to have your vision and then to know what that is. So if people have a piece of paper and a pen, if they could draw their hand on a piece of paper, please. Either their right hand or left hand, it doesn't matter, draw an outline. And just put a yes in there when that's completed, that they've done that. And in the middle of where your palm would be, or the middle there, put what's my brand as a question. And the other question underneath is what do I stand for as a leader? And could you also do a poll? Do you know what your brand is? And do you know what you currently stand for as a leader?
I'll just do that poll now. So
sure.
we'll just
Thank
wait
you.
on those results. Sorry, so it won't be long.
Yes.
Okay, so that poll is up, guys. So please answer yes or no.
Thank you.
Waiting for a few more people to answer that poll.
Thank you.
All right, so I think, Denise, most of us have answered it. So we've got about 36% of our audience saying that, yes, they know their brand and what they stand for, and
yes.
63% say no, they don't.
Okay, great. So by the end of this session, if you got really clear on that, then that might be a useful outcome for everybody. So let's begin with our first premise, that change equals learning. So what we'd like to talk about is what's our learning as leaders and how do we create this learning environment, and what do we need to learn as a leader to actually know what we stand for in our brand. So there's some of the questions I'd like people to be able to consider. So it's about being able to measure their effectiveness of their leadership style and being really clear about what their style is, what their driving force is around the lessons that they can learn and they can teach, and how do they inspire. So we want to start to really understand what that means for us, because our team is a mirror of ourselves. So what we often do is we often give permission to or for things in our team that we're either conscious or unconscious of. And so today we're going to explore a couple of those concepts. So if we begin to understand what our own steps are to inspire ourselves, and then how do we actually inspire others, and what's our rhythm, what's the beat that happens in our team, which we then can identify as the culture. How do we go about our decision making? So we talk about decision making as having vouchers. And so sometimes what happens is we make decisions all day at work, and then we come home and someone says to us, you know, oh darling, what do we want? What are you having for dinner? And it's like, I don't know, don't ask me, because to have made one more decision really stretches us. Has anyone ever been in that situation where they've come home and the last thing they want is to make a decision about what they're going to cook? Has anyone had that experience and used up their decision-making vouchers at work?
Yeah, so a few of us have. Melanie says most days. Karen says I've seen it in my boss all the time. Yeah.
Right. So what happens is sometimes then if people aren't able to make decisions in a workplace, then they've got to use their voucher up. So then they go home and they make all the decisions at home and no one else gets a look in. And so they're often then referred to, you know, maybe referred to as a bit of a control freak. It's just that they haven't used up their decision-making voucher. And so we want to start to get this balance for ourselves so the whole of us turns up at work. So if we enjoy making decisions, you know, if we like to be part of that, and having that opportunity throughout the day becomes really important. So our thumb talks about our non-negotiables. So could you write just in your thumb area of your finger, the first step is around our non-negotiables. So what do they mean for us as a non-negotiable? Maybe one of those might be that for ourselves personally, we want to be part of a decision-making process. We'd like to have what we say valued. So that might be the first step. So as we start to go forward, we're going to look at those 5 key areas that we talk about our keys for success. So our decision-making is a really important one. And what are our non-negotiables around that one? How are we able to measure our ability to influence? Because the only way, of course, you can influence someone is if you're in rapport with them. So when you're talking about your non-negotiables, how are you building rapport with everybody in your team? Rapport doesn't mean that you have to like everybody. It just simply means, have you worked out a way to actually work with them? And so that becomes really important around building the rapport. The other one is the heartbeat. You know, what is the culture of innovation and continuous improvement? So as a non-negotiable, are you up for learning? Are you up for your team always learning? As you start to look at what are some of those things around your non-negotiables, no matter what, and how do we demonstrate that? So we've started to raise a few questions, and we'll come to answer those as we go throughout this session. And the next really important one is your leadership style. How is that valued in the business? And is it valued in the business? And how is it demonstrated in your workplace that your style is valued? Because everybody has a different style, a different leadership style. And so often what happens is if you've been led or managed by someone who you may not particularly respect, and yet you respect the position they hold, then there's sometimes internal conflict. So sometimes someone can be in a leadership role that we may not really respect or like them as a person, and yet we respect the position they hold. Has anyone ever been in that conflict where they respect the position of their manager, but they may not necessarily like the person that's there? Because that can create a lot of internal conflict. And we need to understand that maybe that style of leadership is something that is not really working for us. Can you just ask the group around that one, please?
Yeah, so Caroline and Kate have both said yes. So yeah, they do agree on that.
It is sometimes really challenging. And so often what we can do is we tend to sometimes put a label above people's heads. And so if I could ask them, what's the label above people's heads that they get on really well with? And the label above that might be friend or confidant or something, you know, to that extent. And what's the label above someone's head that they don't get on so well with? Yeah, that one. And so what happens sometimes is that we actually have either people put labels above our head or we put labels above them. So in our non-negotiables, one of the labels that we like to work with is to hold people as able. So regardless of who they are, the label that we like to put above their head is to hold people as able. And so if you hold people as able, it gives us a very different way of speaking to people, of relating to people. And so maybe one of the outcomes for the people on the session today may be to think about how might they learn to move the labels or change the labels to hold that person as able. So just give people a couple of minutes. What might be a strategy for them to actually do that? How might they change the label above someone's head that drives them nuts to hold them as being able to do things? Because their voice will be different, the intonation, their tone, all of those things when they stand in a place of neutral.
So just waiting for people to respond. Sure. All right, so Pip has said try and be more empathetic.
Yes, okay, terrific, thank you. The challenge with try is if you try and pick a pen up, if everyone tries to pick the pen up, then of course you either do it or you don't. So what is the one action that you will take to actually make that happen? So often our language can give us away as women too. Sometimes we might put, oh, just in front of our language, or sometimes we might go, oh, I might try. And so it's really important that when we start to put in place our own sense of leadership, that we're using very empowering language. So maybe the challenge might be to actually consider each time we go to use try that we might say we will or we won't, and we're making a decision around our action. That might be one step to consider.
Great. All right, so Melinda said try to be less controlling.
So she will be less controlling.
Yeah, she will be.
Okay.
Melanie has said use appreciative inquiry. Nara said all people are human and we all have faults, but they needn't be what defines us. We all have talents too.
Okay, so what's the one action? Is there an action that's come out of that for her?
Not yet.
That's okay.
I'll just give her a second to respond.
Sure.
Melinda has said allow staff to make the mistakes and guide them to better decisions.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, isn't it, is about people having that learning moment, especially around discovery learning. Terrific, thank you. That's lovely.
Yep, and Nara has responded again and said, see the talents, look past the faults.
Absolutely. See the talent and hold them as able. Very nice. Okay, so that's terrific. Well done, everybody. Okay, so if we move to the next slide, there's a couple of people there that we've included as women of influence. And I'm sure many of you, or most of you, have heard of these women, Edith Cowan. And she was the one who allowed and introduced laws in Parliament to allow women to be educated as lawyers in Australia. She's also represented on our $50 note. And the amazing thing was that when she went into Parliament, when she was first elected, she used to wear an acorn. And she also handed out acorns. That became her signature. And what she said was that she was a tough nut to crack. And so here was this woman, you know, sort of standing her ground and actually creating quite a visionary about women being able to practice law in Australia. Golda Meir, and she was also an amazing woman as leader of Israel. And the one thing that really has always inspired me is about trusting myself to create the kind of self that I'd be happy to live with all my life, and to make the most of myself by fanning the inner sparks of possibility. And I really do stand in a place of possibility, and I have a 3.5-year-old granddaughter as well as 3 other grandchildren. And my 3.5-year-old granddaughter, she was doing something the other day, and I said to her, you know, it's about improvising. And if something's not working, it's about improvising, and so you can see what, you know, you can do to make something work. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, she was having a go at something, and she turned around and she said to me, "Grandma, I don't want to improvise," which meant she wants the solution straight away. And so I guess for all of us, you know, we are innate teachers, and it gives us a possibility of creating and teaching wherever we have that opportunity. And that's really the message that, as a leader, that Golda Meir has certainly inspired me. Oprah, and around her philosophy about, you know, taking that sort of responsibility for your life. And so we come back to those non-negotiables from those 3 women, that to put your best moment in the best place at the best time. And what is it that you're standing for and your brand that is now a non-negotiable? What is it that will take you to a place that will stand you in your power that is completely a non-negotiable for you? And the fourth person that I felt that was really important to also, and I've given the link to the TED Talk, is the experience of women systematically underestimating their own abilities. And that's what I was leading to before, when we sometimes say, what do you do? And some people say, oh, I'm just. So if that's up until now been part of your language, then maybe you might consider, when you are saying that, to really catch yourself so that you don't, and you start to say, what does that mean? You know, how is that for you really important about the language that you say to yourself? Women do not negotiate for themselves in the workplace. Up until a few years ago, if a job was advertised over 120,000 Ks, most people knew that women wouldn't apply. That's changed somewhat over the last couple of years. That, you know, the way that wording is in advertising, the way that internal recruitment happens, we might need to consider as well. So, in summarising our non-negotiables, what do you do? What can you do around that? How do you set your team agreements? Do you have those in place? What are your non-negotiables for your team, no matter what? And what behaviours do you give permission to or for? So the question we like to ask is, who has trained you to leave them alone? So if we take a helicopter view of the team in which we work, who has trained you to leave you alone? That is, each time you've gone to ask them something, they've given you a hard time. Or have you trained someone to leave you alone? So if we could do a poll on this, have you got people in your team that have trained you to leave them alone? Just a yes or a no. That means every time you've gone to ask them something, they give you such a song and dance that they're the last person you go and ask. Isa, how's that going?
Yep, so Anita says not currently, Kate says not really, Melinda says haven't had the experience.
Okay,
Kerry
that's fine.
says no. Yeah.
Okay, terrific, thank you. And so it's a really interesting one as we start to raise our awareness, and often when we're working with managers, you know, they'll sort of say, oh yes, so and so. So that's great that you haven't had that experience. That's excellent, thank you. The next one is about setting your team's direction. It's about building your wisdom. Wisdom is the application of knowledge. And sometimes people will go, yeah, I know, they might have a method pattern. But knowing without doing is not really knowing. So setting on your hand printout in the next finger is if you write direction. So making sure that you align the direction of your team with the direction of the organisation, and the values are aligned as well. And that the expectations are really clear. And we like to put our KPIs, or we call them travelling wells. Are they in place to know that your team is heading in the right direction? What do you do to ensure that? How often do you check in? The next third one is around flexibility. And as I said previously, you're not able to influence people unless you're in rapport with them. And so looking at your own flexibility, when we have our, three circles that we often stand in our life, we have our own circle of influence. And how big is that? We have our circle of concern and we have our circle of control. And the challenge for some leaders is that they think that their circle of control is bigger than their circle of influence. And as you would know, your circle of control is very much smaller than your circle of influence. So for fearless leaders, what they do is they turn down their voice of their ego about being in control and really turn up their volume of listening. So the flexibility comes around our ability to listen. And so the third index finger is around our flexibility. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how flexible would you see yourself? 1 being, not very flexible, I need to know what everything is and everything in its place. 5 being, I'm able to handle whatever comes my way. If people could put a number there, that would be great, around measuring their own flexibility as a leader. Because remember, your team is a mirror of you. So if your team is very flexible and adaptable, that's because you've demonstrated that value. Sorry, Isa.
That's all right. So we've got a few people responding to that. But before we go on, I just want to mention that we will be holding the webinar until about 12. We did start a little bit late, so there is about 20 more minutes left to go. If you do need to leave early, that's completely fine. We do understand. And I will also be popping up an exit survey on the right-hand side of this presentation for you all to complete if you can. So back to your question, how flexible do you see yourself? We've got a few people around the 3 to 4 mark actually answering.
Okay, so
3 and 4.
So my brother-in-law was looking at being flexible, and we'd go to a restaurant, and if it's not on the menu, he then gets really irritated. And then he decided he'd be flexible, so he ordered something else, and they came out and said, no, that wasn't on the menu either, and he got quite irate. And we said, I thought you were practicing your flexibility strength. He said he just did. So flexibility is really about how much change can you manage before you go no. And the challenge for some people is they think that because it's one or two, then that's it. Whereas sometimes it might require 3 or 4 or 5 goes. So just start to be, raise your awareness around how flexible is your team and how flexible does the culture allow people to be. So once the decision's made, is that it? Or is there a little bit of room for negotiation? The next one, looking at our commitment, we really are committed to the concept that your team is a mirror of your leadership and that you can only manage if you start to measure. So as a leader, how do you demonstrate your commitment to measuring success, and how is the culture committed? So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being, oh, they're not really committed, we don't measure much, to 5, we measure everything. We measure performance, we measure our flexibility, we measure the impact that the culture has on the way that people's morale. So could you give a bit of a helicopter view about how your manager or your organisation values measuring to manage?
So we've got 3 5s. Melinda, Kate and Melanie have all said 5.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. Well done.
Yeah,
okay,
Carolyn 5. Yep.
Wonderful. And of course that gives everyone a very tight structure to operate in, where everyone knows the rules of the game. So you're turning up to play, basketball, and that's exactly what they're playing. Otherwise, some people might turn up to play a game of cricket or a game of soccer or a game of netball, and they're in the wrong gear because nothing is being measured to know how to manage. So well done to those organisations. That's excellent. And so in terms of the lessons and the learnings that happens up until this point, obviously if you've got a value of 5 and you're measuring, then the level of personal development and professional development is very high, I would imagine, in those organisations. And so for themselves, what are they putting in place around some of the lessons learned, and how are they recorded? So when projects are finished or at the end of the week, how are lessons learned and lessons recorded for people's future development? What actually happens in their organisation?
Waiting for some responses there, Denise.
Thank you.
So, won't be long.
Beg your pardon?
Won't be long.
That's okay.
Got a few people typing away.
Thank you so much for responding.
So Kerry says regular meetings with staff and reflection on outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Melinda says that we have KPI dashboards, regular meetings, both one-on-one and large group, formal PD plans.
Fantastic.
Kate says annually, but team progress and achievements are discussed weekly.
Mm-hmm.
And Anara says staff achievements shared with whole staff at team meetings.
Excellent. Okay, so that's fabulous. Well done to those organisations and those leaders. They're really demonstrating a great commitment to people's development, both personally and professionally. So when we start to look at the culture, as we move to the next slide, the culture and the heartbeat of innovation and continuous improvement, with the fact that they're working in that space, and so one of the things that is really important in all of this is around that innovation and continuous improvement, which is why you start to record things, because it gives that opportunity. I'm just wanting people to know, and whether they know, the difference between transactional and transformational leadership. And this comes back to the first part of when we were talking about when you first start to manage. So do people understand what transactional leadership is and transformational leadership is? Put a yes or a no. Yes for transactional or no for transactional or yes for transformational.
We've got a few yeses, so yeah, I think most people do understand.
Oh, terrific. And the challenge around leadership, and that's part of what I was saying about your brand and to understand what your style is. Because when we start to step into really being leaders, we need to understand the impact both of those have. So sometimes we might need to be a little bit transactional, and yet our team prefers us to be transformational. That is the opportunities for learning and to working with the group of people to make the difference. For some, they're much more comfortable in transactional, being quite directive. And it's really finding the balance between two, which is really important. So it's about understanding your own style and your own brand that becomes really the important thing, and working out what's important for you and where does it sit comfortably. And the idea of transforming yourself, role models to everyone that you're up for learning as well. And the fifth chunk is around the fun factor. What is it that creates the fun? So if I could ask the people there, on a level of 1 to 5, 1 being, it's quite fun, 5 being it's really fun, and that's something that's really important in our team culture, could they just give a rating of that? Thank you.
So we've got a few 4s. So Melanie, Melinda, Carolyn and Kate have all said 4.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So celebrating success and having those learnings, that's wonderful. Well done. So I'm sure when you go back today that you'll recognise that your culture and your team is really managing these 5 keys that we believe are the success for a business, and that's great to hear. The steps that we've also included is looking at around the model of retention, recruitment and relationships, and the reskilling and return on investment. So they're the 5 underpinning things, so that when things are working around those 5 keys, of course people will be retained within the business. So I'd like to give a bit of a summary of our 5 things as well, which is around leadership, is around influence, and you need to influence to be able to build rapport. That listening grows trust, so the more that people feel like they're being listened to, the level of trust then becomes higher because people feel safe to share, people feel safe to be involved. Fearless leaders turn down their ego and the volume of their ego and turn up the listening volume. So if people are feeling really listened to and valued, then of course what happens in the organisation is that people then feel valued and listened to and want to share and be inspired, and then we have innovation and continuous improvement. So if people could give a rating of 1 to 5, the level of trust that operates within their team or their organisation, that would be great. 1 being, not very trusting, 5 being very trusting and feel very safe to share and to give feedback, because it's about the measure of being able to give feedback to people that is the measure of trust.
We've got Kate saying 3 to 4, Melinda saying 5, Inara saying 4.5.
Okay, terrific. So if we have a look at our hand now, and we've got the ring finger, which is our commitment, and the little pinky, which is our fun factor, we then start to have a look at those 5 keys, and we start to recognise that the trust needs to operate across all of those areas for it to be working effectively. Being kind and holding people as able, which we've talked about earlier, and by creating success in your team, you also become successful. So successful leaders build successful teams. And for you, it's being part of that success that probably inspires and excites you to be part of your working team. So could I ask people to think about now their brand and their style and what they stand for as a leader? Those who weren't sure before, What clarity have you got now?
We're just having a few people typing up that now.
Thank you.
So Kate says, I'm still not sure, but have more information to develop both.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. At least to start to think about that.
That might be all the responses that we have so far.
Okay, thank you. All right, so one of the things that our brand is around leaving a legacy. One of the things that's important for us is that we lead by being a role model, and we demonstrate, and we expect our team then to follow our lead and to hold the values that are really important for us, which is around the 5 keys that we've shared earlier. It's about the team reflecting our values when they're talking to other people, when they're working across other organisations, and when they're working with each other. The please and thank you at the end of each conversation or at the end of each day. So one of the non-negotiables in our workplace is that people thank each other at the end of the day. Another one is at the start of the day, we come together as a group regardless of where we are, whether we're across the globe, whether we're in the same country. And so for us, it's setting up that really important leadership and modelling the expectations that we have. So what is the culture around how your team is demonstrated and how it's being valued is the thing that we do by starting each day with a hello and a welcome and ending each day with a thank you for the work that you've done. So there's lots of those things that we engage in within as part of our brand and part of our culture and what we stand for. We're always very polite with each other and with the people that we work with. The entrepreneurial flair is our ability to engage and build trust and respect. So sometimes we're not always clear about how trust and respect needs to be demonstrated to us. And often we'll say, to new people who are joining us, how do you like to be managed? Because sometimes that's not a question that's often asked. And so we, out of respect, we ask people, how do they like respect and trust demonstrated to them? Because sometimes we're not always clear. And so one of the things is around time. So if for people where time is important and honouring time and someone runs late, then they can feel really disrespected. So there are some people who have absolutely no idea of time and say that let's start a meeting at, about 2 o'clock. And their about 2 o'clock could be 2:05 or 2:10. And so for some people, they get really irritated if the meeting runs over. So hopefully those through-time people today understand and are a little bit flexible if we're running over. And so time becomes an important way to demonstrate respect. We've worked in organisations where there were through-time people and they realised that 2 o'clock meeting was 2 o'clock, except their boss was an in-time. And so they would turn up for meetings, a few minutes before, and their boss wasn't there, who actually needed to start the meeting. So it got to the point where they would watch that when the boss physically got out of their chair, they would actually leave to go to the meeting with them. So can I ask if they've got people in their team who manage time differently, that is through time, they're very conscious of where time is, or in time, they haven't got a clue about time? What about for themselves first? Are they through time, they know where time is and they can measure 10 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour? Or are they in time? They haven't got a clue and they've got to set their watch and have alarms going.
Right, so I can see a few people are typing up now. So Melinda says, I have both in my teams. Kate says both. Melinda says yes, and Pip says yes as well.
Okay, thank you. And so what happens, of course, is managing that becomes really interesting and also giving people an understanding of being respectful. So if people have turned up late and the people who have turned up on time are a bit earlier agitated, and the ones who've turned up late go, oh, hello, how are you? They just want to get on with the meeting. So they don't actually understand why there's an irritation. So that might be a conversation, might be helpful for your group. Looking at the G around growth, making sure there's always some personal and professional opportunities for growth. So we work with the areas of strength and what we call areas of practice. And we get people to write down what's their area of practice that they'd like over the next couple of weeks. And we always make sure there's an opportunity for that to happen. So by the end of the year, the area for practice has actually become an area of strength. So that's an important one for us. Accountability for our actions, taking that personal responsibility and accountability. Holding people and being able to feel safe to give feedback that something's working or not working. It's not about identifying the person, it's about identifying the behaviour that wasn't working in that relationship. And that's all part of feedback. Feedback is always positive and it always gives someone an outcome to work towards. And that's a really important skill to have in place. And so beginning with an I where you're talking in the first person holds that accountability. Sometimes in people's language they use lots of you. So if they could practice I, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I've noticed, I'm a bit confused, then what it does is actually allows the person to stand in that place and not feel like they're being under attack. Chutzpah is a great one. Chutzpah is the way where we say yes as our first response and then we work out how. So it's about pushing yourself just outside, what we consider the comfort zone, which is our learning zone, and always looking at what is the opportunity to create something better or different, and making sure that people feel safe to do that. And the Y is the yin and the yang. It's our passion for our purpose, and our purpose is about making a difference. And we believe that our personal power and attitude is highly contagious. And my question to you all is your attitude and passion highly contagious, and is it worth catching? So in summary, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what do we do for others? And how do we leave our mark as a leader? And what is your legacy? Because I believe we all make a difference. My question to you is the difference you're making the difference you intend to make? Thank you all for participating today and making a difference.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much for that, Denise, and thanks all for joining today's webinar. I don't believe we don't have any questions to go through at this point in time. Denise, did you want to make any closing comments or?
Oh, thank you. Well, I wish you all the best of your success in your leadership. Please, I guess, if nothing else, please get your brand and what you stand for as a leader, because it will hold you in such stead for your future growth and development. You're welcome to contact me if you've got any questions, and really happy to sort of have a chat to you if I can be of any assistance. It's really about how do we give every person the next leg up, and we're really open to doing that because that's our legacy. How do we help the next person be the best that they can be in whatever they choose to do?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Denise. We do hope that you all gained some valuable insights and found the technology easy and engaging. So we do look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. So thank you very much and have a good day.
And thank you to Redback. It's a great program and great technology. Thank you, Isa, for your great job.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And managing the challenges. Okay, all the best. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.